The history of America is one of the most fascinating and colorful stories in the world. It begins on a land where indigenous tribes had lived for centuries, long before the arrival of Europeans. Later, explorers and settlers came with new dreams, challenges, and ambitions. This land became a symbol of struggle, sacrifice, revolution, and progress. The America we know today as a global superpower was built through wars, revolutions, and bold decisions. In this video, we will explore the major turning points in American history, from its earliest beginnings to the modern era. Together, we'll witness how a nation was born, how it faced challenges, and how it rose to become a symbol of freedom and justice. This is the history of America. Long before Columbus set foot on American soil, the land was home to Native American tribes who lived in harmony with nature. They hunted animals, grew crops, and developed unique traditions, languages, and stories. For them, the forests, rivers, and mountains were sacred places of worship. Every tribe had its own culture, myths, and way of life. These communities lived peacefully, protecting nature as part of their spiritual duty. When Europeans arrived, the natives faced an entirely new world. At first, there was trade and cautious cooperation, but soon conflicts began over land and resources. Disease and warfare devastated many tribes, reshaping the course of history forever. The Native Americans represent the first chapter of America's story, because without them, the true identity of this land cannot be understood. In 1492, Christopher Columbus set sail on his ship the Santa Maria, in search of a new trade route to Asia. Instead, he reached the shores of America. His arrival marked a turning point in history. At first, Columbus believed he had discovered a new route to the east, but in reality, he had opened the gateway to a whole new world. European nations quickly followed, eager to explore, trade, and settle. This discovery brought European languages, technologies, and cultures, but it also led to the suffering of indigenous people. Native tribes faced disease, displacement, and loss of land. Columbus's journey is remembered as both a triumph of exploration and the beginning of centuries of conflict. It was the spark that set in motion the colonization of the New World. By the 1600s, waves of settlers from England, Spain, France, and the Netherlands crossed the Atlantic in search of new lives. Some came seeking trade and wealth, while others sought freedom from religious persecution. They built wooden houses, small villages, and farms along the American coast. At first, relations with native tribes were cooperative, but as more land was taken, conflicts and wars began. Among these settlers, the English established 13 colonies, which would later form the foundation of the United States. Life in these colonies was tough but full of promise. Settlers wore European clothes and spoke European languages, yet slowly, a new identity was emerging, an American identity. These early settlements became the seeds of independence and revolution that would grow stronger in the years to come. The road to American independence began with resistance against British taxes. In 1773, Britain imposed heavy taxes on tea, angering the colonists. In protest, a group of revolutionaries disguised themselves as Native Americans and boarded British ships in Boston Harbor. They threw hundreds of crates of tea into the water in what became known as the Boston Tea Party. This bold act was not just about tea. It was a message to Britain that Americans would no longer accept unfair rule. The British government responded with stricter laws, hoping to crush the rebellion. Instead, the event ignited the flames of revolution. The Boston Tea Party remains one of the most symbolic moments in American history, representing courage, defiance, and the beginning of the fight for freedom. By the mid-1770s, tensions between Britain and the American colonies had reached a breaking point. The colonists were tired of unfair taxes and laws made by a government across the ocean. In 1775, the first shots of the American Revolutionary War were fired at Lexington and Concord. Farmers, shopkeepers, and ordinary men took up arms against one of the most powerful armies in the world. Leading them was George Washington, a determined general who inspired hope in his soldiers. The revolution was not just a battle for independence. but also for ideals freedom, equality, and the right to self-rule. Against all odds, the colonies united and stood together. This struggle would change the course of history forever, leading to the birth of a new nation, the United States of America. On July 4, 1776, a group of leaders gathered in Philadelphia to make history. They signed the Declaration of Independence, a bold document that declared the 13 American colonies free from British rule, written primarily by Thomas Jefferson. It proclaimed the revolutionary idea that all men are created equal and have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The signing of this declaration was a daring act of rebellion, because Britain still considered the colonies its property. But for the Americans, it was a moment of courage and hope. The Founding Fathers knew they were risking their lives, yet they believed freedom was worth every sacrifice. This document not only created the United States, but also inspired freedom movements around the world. George Washington became the face of the American Revolution, appointed as Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army. He led ordinary farmers and volunteers against Britain's powerful forces. The war was difficult. Arkan soldiers often lacked food, shoes, and weapons. Winters were harsh, especially at Valley Forge, where troops suffered greatly. Yet Washington's leadership, discipline, and belief in independence kept the army alive. With French support, the Americans achieved key victories, including the decisive Battle of Yorktown in 1781. Britain finally surrendered, marking the birth of a new nation. Washington's courage and determination made him not only a war hero, but also the first president of the United States. To this day, he is remembered as the father of the nation. After gaining independence, the young United States looked westward. The idea of manifest destiny spread the belief that Americans were destined to expand across the continent. Families packed their belongings into covered wagons and traveled into the vast unknown, searching for land and opportunity. This westward movement created new towns, farms, and trade routes, but it also led to conflict. Native tribes were forced from their lands, and bloody battles broke out. The expansion opened doors to growth and prosperity, yet it came with pain and loss for many. The Wild West became a symbol of courage and adventure, but also of struggle and survival. This movement transformed America from a small group of colonies into a powerful growing nation stretching from coast to coast. As America grew, one of its darkest chapters deepened slavery. Millions of Africans were brought across the Atlantic and forced to work on plantations, especially in the South. They toiled in cotton and tobacco fields under brutal conditions, denied basic rights and freedoms. Families were torn apart, and lives were controlled by slave masters. While the northern states began to question slavery, the southern economy depended on it, creating sharp divisions within the country. Enslaved people resisted in every way they could through small rebellions, escape attempts, and cultural strength. Their songs, stories, and courage became a voice of survival. Slavery shaped the politics, economy, and identity of America, and it would eventually push the nation into its bloodiest conflict, the Civil War. By the mid-1800s, America was deeply divided. The North wanted to abolish slavery, while the South depended on it for its economy. This division erupted into the Civil War in 1861. Abraham Lincoln, 16th president, became the guiding light. During this crisis, he believed that slavery must end and that the Union must stay united. Under his leadership, the Emancipation Proclamation was issued, freeing enslaved people in the Confederate States. Lincoln faced enormous challenges, but he never gave up on his vision of equality and freedom. Sadly, he did not live to see the full healing of the nation, as he was assassinated in 1865. Yet, legacy remains. Lincoln is remembered as the leader who held America together during its darkest days and gave it a new birth of freedom. The Civil War's turning point came in July 1863 at Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. For 3 days, Union and Confederate armies clashed in one of the bloodiest battles in American history. Cannons roared, muskets fired, and thousands of soldiers fell on both sides. But the Union Army stood strong and defeated General Robert E. Lee's forces, marking a major victory. After the battle, President Lincoln delivered his famous Gettysburg Address, short but powerful speech that reminded the nation of its founding ideals, liberty, equality, and democracy. He said that those who died had given their lives so that government of the people, by the people, for the people shall not perish from the earth. Gettysburg was more than just a battle it symbolized. America's struggle to stay united and committed to freedom. As the 19th century ended, America entered a new era, the Industrial Revolution. Factories rose across cities, trains connected distant lands, and machines replaced hand labor. Immigrants from all over the world arrived, seeking jobs and a better life. This rapid growth made America an economic powerhouse, but it also brought challenges. Workers, including children, toiled long hours in unsafe factories for low wages. Cities became crowded and polluted, yet innovation flourished. Electricity, steel, and railroads transformed daily life. The Industrial Revolution reshaped America, turning it into a land of opportunity and ambition. It also gave rise to powerful business leaders, labor movements, and technological progress that paved the way for the modern United States. This was the dawn of America as a global industrial giant. In October 1929, the U.S. stock market crashed, sending shockwaves around the world. Banks collapsed, businesses shut down, and millions of Americans lost their jobs. This period, known as the Great Depression, was the darkest economic time in U.S. history. Families stood in breadlines for food, farmers lost their land, and hope seemed to vanish. President Franklin D. Roosevelt introduced the New Deal, a set of programs to revive the economy and support struggling Americans. Slowly, the nation began to recover. The Great Depression taught hard lessons about resilience and unity. It showed how deeply economic hardship can affect society, but also how people can endure even the toughest times. Shaped America's policies and strengthened its determination for the future. In 1941, after the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, the United States entered World War II. American soldiers fought bravely across Europe and the Pacific. On June 6, 1944, U.S. forces landed on Normandy beaches in France, a day remembered as D-Day. It was one of the most decisive battles of the war, leading to the fall of Nazi Germany. Back home, Americans worked tirelessly in factories, producing weapons, ships, and supplies for the war effort. Women played a huge role, stepping into jobs traditionally held by men. By 1945, the United States emerged victorious, but at a heavy cost. Millions of lives were lost worldwide. America's role in World War II not only shaped the outcome of the war, but also established the nation as a global leader in the fight for peace and freedom. The mid-20th century brought another struggle, this time for equality at home. African Americans, long oppressed by segregation and discrimination, began the civil rights movement. Leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. inspired millions with their calls for justice. In 1963, King delivered his iconic "I Have a Dream" speech at the Lincoln Memorial, speaking of a future where people would be judged not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. Marches, protests, and boycotts spread across the nation, demanding equal rights in schools, workplaces, and public life. Though faced with violence and resistance, the movement achieved historic victories. Including the Civil Rights Act of 1964, this era proved that America's promise of freedom had to include everyone, regardless of race. It was a step toward a more just nation. In 1969, the world watched in awe as America achieved what once seemed impossible. On July 20th, astronaut Neil Armstrong set foot on the moon, declaring that's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. The Apollo 11 mission symbolized not just technological progress, but also America's determination to explore the unknown. The space race, fueled by competition with the Soviet Union, had driven innovation in science and engineering. Millions of Americans gathered around televisions to witness the historic moment as the U.S. flag was planted on the lunar surface. The moon landing was more than a scientific triumph. It was a statement that America had reached beyond Earth and into the stars. It inspired generations to dream bigger and push the boundaries of human achievement. By the late 20th century, New York City had become the symbol of America's progress and diversity. Its skyline, dominated by the twin towers of the World Trade Center, represented economic power and global influence. Tourists from around the world came to admire the skyscrapers, and millions worked in the city that never sleeps. The Twin Towers were not just buildings, they were icons of ambition in modern America. On a clear evening, the skyline reflected the hope and energy of the nation. But behind the beauty, challenges were still present. Economic shifts, global tensions, and rising political conflicts. The skyline before 2001 is remembered as a picture of optimism. Just before one of the darkest days in American history would change it forever. On September 11, 2001, tragedy struck. Terrorists hijacked airplanes and crashed them into the World Trade Center in New York City and the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. The Twin Towers collapsed in flames, taking nearly 3,000 innocent lives. World watched in shock as America faced one of its darkest days. Heroes emerged, firefighters, police officers, and ordinary citizens who risked their lives to save others. The attacks reshaped America's security, politics, and foreign policy. They also united the nation in grief and determination. Of the ashes of 9/11s came resilience and strength. The event remains a solemn reminder of both vulnerability and courage, marking a turning point in modern history that the world will never forget. Today, the United States stands as a nation shaped by its past, a blend of triumphs and struggles. From native tribes to space exploration, from civil wars to civil rights, each chapter has defined its identity. Modern America is a land of innovation, diversity, and influence. Its cities shine with skyscrapers, its universities lead in research, and its culture spreads across the globe. Yet challenges remain. Political divisions, social inequality, and global responsibilities test its unity. Still, the ideals of liberty, democracy, and opportunity continue to inspire people worldwide. The story of America is far from finished. It is a nation still writing its history, learning from the past while reaching toward the future. The journey of the United States proves that freedom and resilience remain its greatest strengths.